Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to an executive session of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Today's date is May 8th, 2024. The first, I need a motion to go into executive move. Okay, moved by Senator Chandley, seconded by Senator Gannon. Okay, the first bill we are going to take up is House Bill 1633. Senator Abbas?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move on to pass.
And I will second that for discussion purposes. We have 3 amendments. Only 2 are available right now. The last one is being printed. I know. So what is going to happen, we're going to hear testimony on all 3, and then we're going to take a break so we can look at these 3 amendments together. Because there are differences between each one before we come back and make a decision on which amendment and how we're going to do this. Okay? So I am going to, the first amendment we're going to take up is amendment number 1840. This is an amendment that's been presented by Senator Rosenwald. Senator, would you like to walk us through your amendment?
Thank you. And thank you for welcoming me to Judiciary this
It's always
afternoon.
a pleasure to work with you,
This is
Senator.
my first time here. And I'm excited. I want to say that I've been working with Senator Abbas pretty closely over a number of, maybe it's even months, weeks at least. And there are a lot of places where we agreed. There are some differences between our amendments. And there were a couple that I would just like to bring attention to. On page, and some of them are just moving the wording from one place to another. So some of them are really minor, but there are a few I'd like to just bring up. One is on page 6, line 16. We did not include in our amendment, but Senator Abbas did, the word processing. And the reason was we were concerned that we make sure we were not opening the door to home grow. And we were just concerned about whether it could be seen that way. So that's one change. Further down that page, starting on line 34, the penalties for public smoking or vaping. We suggested compromise language that had 3 different penalty phases. And the first one was a violation. The second one was also a violation, but had a bigger fine, and the third subsequent to the second offense would be a misdemeanor. So that's different. Over on page 8, in the non-discrimination, what's called the non-discrimination section, it starts on line 17. It's 318 F7. We included other sections that had been, I think, in the House bill that Senator Abbas did not. One is not discriminating among people who are legally allowed to possess and use cannabis for public benefits, driver's licenses, housing, or in the workplace. pretrial probation and parole and malpractice. So that his non-discrimination section is shorter. Over on page 15, this type is so small, it's hard for me to see. But in section 6, C6, it sort of starts on line 22. We thought there should be preference in license awarding to organizations that had previous experience in the industry, including the ATCs. On page 16, no, that's just a wording change. Over on page 19, 18, line 8. We propose reducing the amount of THC in edibles to 5 milligrams per serving. And that's a difference. That was a recommendation from New Futures. And then on page 23, starting on line 29, we thought that the therapeutic products that are sold in the retail outlets should not be taxed. They're currently not taxed. And so that's a difference. On page 24, line 20, we would stick with the word shall on line 20. This is the section that is what happens if a municipality votes not to allow retail recreational marijuana. And there's a petition by 5% of the registered voters. We thought that just as with all other petitions by 5% of the voters, that the legislative body, the governing body, should put it to another vote rather than being able to say, well, too bad, we're not going to take a revote. So we would go with shall there instead of may. On page 26, down at the bottom, in the makeup of the Cannabis Advisory Board, New Futures had suggested replacing the public health official with a certified prevention specialist. That is all the significant differences.
And if I may, Madam Chair, I just wanted to mention one thing that on page 20, one significant difference that I think Senator Rosenwald just skipped because she went over so many, this is a long bill, is the potency issue. In the amendment before you, potency is set at 30%. And with the Cannabis Advisory Board having the opportunity to review, as opposed to, I believe, in Senator Abbas's, it is done in rules.
Right, we wanted it to be in statute, not in rules. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator. Okay, are there any questions? Senator Gannon?
Is there a place in here where you have homegrown in this bill?
No.
No, okay.
Homebrew is prohibited.
Thank you.
It's not, we were in a total agreement. So there is no home grow. We were concerned about including the word processing because we worried that it might open the door to home grow.
Follow up? Just a little thing, because we went through in commerce packaging and things that would entice children. Don't you think the fact that you even make something that's referred to as a gummy, a candy, probably a bad idea, because you're making it more appealing to children. Children are going to find these, think they're candy. Just the whole idea that you're putting out a product that's in comparative to a candy product and commonly referred to as a gummy seems like a bad idea.
I have to say, I've never seen an edible, so I don't know what shape they're in. But I do know for people who have trouble chewing or swallowing, and I'm thinking of maybe elderly people who are ill or have a disability, something of a soft texture probably would be helpful. So I don't know if they're gonna
Okay.
look like Swedish fish.
Okay, thank you. Quick follow-up.
Follow-up?
The 5 milligrams you mentioned of THC, the thing about THC with me is always the concentration. So everything has to be under 15, a THC level of 15. Is that correct in this bill?
I don't believe so. What,
Do you have a limit on the potency?
well, we had a different limit on the potency of edibles versus the amendment that Senator Abbas has. Ours is half of what he proposes.
Okay.
We went with the new futures recommendation. I think there's a different potency level on non-edibles.
I can look that up. Thank you, Senator.
Not sure where.
I'm good. I'll find it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any further questions? Senator Abbas? No? Okay. All right, thank you
Can I
very
have
much.
one more question?
Sure, Senator Gannon.
Last one. I'm sorry. I've been on the marijuana commission about 8 years ago, again, this last time. And the first time the ATCs, we were giving them priority, the ones that we picked, and they swore they were never going to go to retail establishments. That was part of the reason they got their licensing, was that they would never become regular retail sales. And now yet we're giving them retail sales. Is there any thought to that? Or I remember why we didn't. We didn't want them to ever, they're going to, it's therapeutic, it's medicine, we're never going retail. And here we are now giving them what we said we wouldn't.
I have my own thoughts on it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Are there any further questions on amendment number 1840S? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Okay, next, we are going to take up amendment number 1844S and ask Senator Bradley to come up and talk to us about his amendment. Yeah, I'm just got it, you just got it, so.
Chair, I actually have a copy of it.
You have it? Matthew, is there another?
No, got it.
Oh, he's got it. We're good.
Sorry, there's a lot of amendments.
Senator Bradley, would you walk us through
Yeah.
your amendment?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. So I've given you two documents to try to make it a little bit easier. The first is the Amendment 1584, sponsored by Senator Abbas and Senator Rosenwald. That was the hearing. And if you open it up, you'll see that there's red lines and things like that. So if you refer to that while we walk through Amendment 1844, I think it'll make it easier for you to see the changes that I'm proposing. Okay, so the first change is on page 5. And the section on the Abbas-Rosenwald amendment is also on page 5. There is a deletion of what's in yellow in that amendment from lines 30 to 33. That's the vertical integration. And I expressed concern about that at the hearing. So that is eliminated. Secondly, the sentence, and you'll see it on the Abbas-Rosenwald amendment at the bottom, will be the basis for forfeiture. That's eliminated. And that's so that if there's a big criminal enterprise bringing a lot of marijuana in, there's the opportunity for forfeiture in New Hampshire. On my amendment, on line 33, the word producing is deleted, and that would have been on the top of page 6 of the Abbas-Rosenwald amendment. When you say producing, I think it opens the door for home grow. So I've eliminated that. Processing, I think, is different. So in any case, the next change, going back to the Abbas-Rosenwald amendment, the transferring of samples, that's deleted, and that's lines 7 through 12. Further down on that page, there's a phraseology with or without remuneration. It's actually on page 7. Apologies, that's deleted. Just to be clear, let's see, moving along. Next change should be in my amendment on page 11. And it's also in the Rosenwald Abbas amendment at the bottom of the page. So in terms of enforcement activities, the way it was written in the Abbas-Rosenwald amendment, they proposed a violation, and for a subsequent offense, I believe it could be a misdemeanor. I've increased that to, in the first instance, a misdemeanor, and in the second instance, on line 30 of my amendment, a Class A misdemeanor. And that obviously for that part of enforcement. Okay, let's see. Okay, bottom of page 12. This was one that I highlighted that I thought was a very important amendment, that there should only be a threshold financial interest in one establishment and only in one category. So the way that it has been written in the Abbas-Rosenwald amendment is it could be 3 cannabis establishments in any single category. I think it's very important that we make this into a smaller entities, not big entities, for the reasons I articulated in the hearing about the monopolization of marijuana. Let's see, on page 13, in the section about training, we've added cannabis use disorder, mental health training, and mandatory reporting criteria. I think it's important in that training that these requirements be part of the training, and you'll see it in my amendment on page 14. No, I'm sorry. I missed it in my highlighting. Sorry, it's here somewhere. Page 13, line 27, 28. On page 14 of my amendment, and at the bottom of page 14 of the Abbas-Rosenwald amendment, remember I talked about all the contaminants that the Canadians test for. That was a huge, long list, and rather than even adopt it by references, I think the better solution to making sure that there's adequate testing for purity is to add the language "and such other substances as the commission may or shall adopt by rule." Okay, page 15 in the Abbas-Rosenwald amendment, and page 15 of my amendment, line 10 or line 15 in the other amendment, I've added the phrase "change in licenses" so that there is an oversight when licenses change, not just for establishment. And you will see that further along in the bill, also to make sure that there's adequate oversight of change of licensure. Moving down on the page 15 of the Abbas-Rosenwald amendment, lines 32 and 33, and my amendment, lines 28 through 30. The maximum amount of THC stays the same for the packages, but I actually think that Senator Rosenwald's amendment is a good one for the packaging. But what I add is "and a concentration of no more than 15% THC." I think we've all heard about new breeds of marijuana being far more potent. I would hope that the committee will adopt that upper limit on THC content. On page 16, lines 14 and 15, dealing with employee samples, that's deleted. As I said in the hearing, don't think there need to be employee samples. Page 18 in both versions adds the transfer of licenses. In my amendment, it's on line 22. Just a reference on page 20 of my amendment adds the word, this was at sequitur, I guess is how you would say it. All the things that follows. Thank you very much. That's just a clarification. Okay. So, top of page 21. When I read the Rosenwald Abbas amendment, it would have appeared to me that the amount of money going to a community was 1% of the 15%. I thought that the intent was 1%. That reflects it. So it's 1% of the monthly total gross revenues. Then a major rewrite starting on page 21, line 22. How a municipality adopts this. I think this is much more consistent with the municipalities being able to adopt or not adopt. So it says right in the beginning on line 23, a town or city may allow a cannabis retail outlet. Line 25, it has to be placed on the warrant, has to be voted on a ballot. Those are in line 25 and 26. On line 30, there has to be a public hearing on the question, and it outlines how the question should be asked. Then flipping the page to page 22, it would require a majority of those voting yes on the cannabis question. There was a provision in the prior amendment that, the way I read it, it almost forced a town to put it on the ballot every year. This says that if it's been rejected, there's no obligation or no ability to come back for at least 3 years. I think a vote should stand as a vote should stand. And then if a town wants to rescind the authority on line 12 and 13, there is a mechanism for doing that. Moving down on my amendment to the bottom of page 22, lobbying activities. It takes out the funding that could be used from other sources. So this is a ban on lobbying. Again, on page 23, 1% of the gross revenues on line 31. But I'm proposing, and I didn't raise this in the hearing, but I think this makes a lot of sense. Instead of the proceeds going into the education trust fund, I think they should go into the general fund. And I say that for reasons, a lot of different reasons. I'm not sure marijuana should be funding education. I don't like the look of that. But also, I suspect there are going to be some consequences to legalization of marijuana if it happens that would be better dealt with out of the general fund than the education trust fund. The balance of the funding remains the same. Some changes in the cannabis control advisory. I suggested at the hearing it be made a commission on line 20, page 24, line 14. The commission would have to approve the rules. I would propose that the Attorney General or a designee of the Attorney General be on the commission, that there be one representative of the cannabis industry, that's line 31. And then on the subsequent page 25, the chair of the Liquor Commission should serve as the chair of the commission. And then making it very clear on line 10 on page 25 and line 17 that the Control Commission has to approve the rules and regulations. Okay, now we get into further changes. There was a section on line 26 in existing law that if it remains in law, it would undermine the penalties for fentanyl, so lines 21 through 23 are struck. Then the annulment section, I'm proposing it just go back to current law, so I think that has changed. Several of the sections, starting at section 15, and some renumbering. Attorney Lehman can explain that better. And then I think the last change, and I hadn't been able to find it because the final amendment came out at about 12:30, is to add more law enforcement to the Liquor Commission, and that's somewhere in here. So I hope that for the reasons I articulated in the public hearing, if it's going to pass, I think these changes tighten it up significantly and would make it, if it's going to pass, a better product.
Okay, thank you very much for your testimony, Senator. Are there any questions for Senator Bradley? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, Senator.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next we have the final version. And I don't think I have one. Yes, it is amendment number 1833S. And Senator Abbas, will you speak to your amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll just be very straightforward and honest as I can be. One of the things I was saying before we even started all this was it would be much better if we had one 40-page amendment, not three, that all come out this day. So anyone who can't say I didn't tell you so. With that being said, in respect to the potency limit being at 10 milligrams for any type of edible, the reason why that number was selected is to remain competitive with the marijuana miles that border New Hampshire and Maine. So that was the reason why we did that, was so the franchisee who was close to that out-of-state competitor could remain competitive. So at just the point, that's what I would hope that we would leave it at that, because these franchisees, if one of them struggles, it's an attack on all. And no franchise in any industry wants to see one go under. When it came to the mandatory training, I did add the cannabis use disorder as part of the training. I didn't put the mental health treatment in there, but I did add that. For the public use provision, I'm not going to, with all due respect to the other amendment by my colleague who's here today, I'm not going to support the public use, the second offense being a violation. I think the number one complaint that I hear over anything else is public use. So I would leave the first offense to be a violation. I think leaving it open to the discretion to kind of based on a case-by-case circumstance on how egregious that violation is. The second offense can be a misdemeanor. It's a 5-year look-back period. I think that there's really no excuse to be violating that law in the first place, never mind twice. In respect to the therapeutic product being subject to the franchise fee, I want to go back in time when we had this commission in the fall, and that was discussed in detail. And we actually discussed it twice because there was a lot of ways and directions this could have gone. And they're asking, these ATCs want to join the retail market. They want to have their store inside of the franchise store and really kind of complicates things and it can create an unfair market advantage. So what we did was, all right, if you're going to voluntarily apply and you're asking to join this industry, now the retail market, that's what they want. We don't want to have their sign, their logo in a franchise. That's just not how franchises work. If they're going to, but they'll be able to sell their product and their therapeutic product in addition to retail. But the idea was let all the stores sell their product, and they'll kind of have that corner of the market, and that I think would give us an opportunity where we can lower the franchise fee. That was because now you have a larger market share. It also makes it really, when it comes to selecting the franchisee, that if an ATC is the applicant, and let's say Merrimack is the ATC were to apply, well, if they were to convert to the franchisee, essentially your competitor is voluntarily relinquishing their storefront for the franchise. So it seemed like they would be a good candidate just based on that alone. They are specifically referenced as the consideration, but now they're saying they don't want to pay the fee. And they agreed to it. When we talked about it, they said all three entities had a representative that was there at the same time. They were all right with it. And I said, well, go home, think it over, do the math, come back. Let's do this again, just to make sure, just because, we kind of, the first time was on the spot. Well, guess what happened? They all came back. They were all good with it. And now here we are. Everyone wants to take it up. How could we do such a thing? Well, if we lower the actual franchise fee, let's say 12.5%, these retailers are going to they won't have to pass that on to the patients. Trust me, they won't, because every product they sell, which the retail market is about 80% of the market. So that franchise fee, by lowering it, actually would benefit the consumers and the patients, but we're using their market share. The percentage I hear is like around 15 to 20%. So that's what I would hope we could do. Now, and what I put forward today, it's still at 15%, because I was hoping we can be at a consensus of what that fee would be, but I would be open to 12.5 for that reason. But if to take that out, as they now testified at the public hearing, that they don't want to pay it. Obviously, they don't want to pay it. I get it. Why would they? But for me to support anything, it would have to stay in the bill. I don't operate that way. When we come to an arrangement, and that's it, we move forward, we design a system, and now they want to make a material change. I'm not going to go along with that. I think the advisory board that was discussed by Senator Bradley and I believe Senator Rosenwald, I think we're all in agreement on that. When it comes to the amount of stores or franchises an individual entity can own, I left it at 3. I understand there's 15 stores, but to me, it's important. We're assuming we're going to have 15 stellar, qualifying, amazing applicants, which I hope we do. That would really be great, to diversify the portfolio. But if we don't, and we have to start taking applicants that are not as ideal as we would like, I think we're kind of putting ourselves in a corner where we won't be able to get out of it. We'll have to legislate our way now out of it. So I think it's important to at least leave that open. I also left vertically integrated in, at least as a definition. It's not used throughout the bill, but in the rulemaking process, if a cultivator becomes a manufacturer and that manufacturer owns a franchise, well, it was easier just to define what that would be for the purposes of rulemaking and to kind of leave it at that. When it came to some of the I call them the Canadian rules, I'm going to be honest, it was about 30-something pages of regulations on different hazardous things, the pesticides and all that. That's not my area of specialty to put that much information into a bill or even reference it. I wasn't comfortable doing that without being able to properly vet it. I'm not saying it's bad, it just, I would hope that a future legislator or any commission would make sure to vet that language and make sure it fits into what we're trying to do if we were to go forward in anything. I did add a provision limiting how many can be in a municipality. 1 per municipality unless the population exceeds 50,000, which essentially Nashua and Manchester, I think the only 2 would be able to put more than 1. When it came to the ballot question, by requiring it to be on the ballot, the reason why we did that, and their concern is if you're going to have a limited amount of retail stores, in order to really strategically figure out where to put them, you need to know where you're allowed to put them, in which communities you can put them in. So I think it's important to kind of get that out of the way right away as soon as possible to figure out if it's a yes or no. I did change the language to, if it were to not pass, not requiring it go on the ballot again. I left it as, I changed it to say may. And there would be a procedure where it could go on the ballot again, but it's not mandatory. When it came to some of the revenue, the 1/15 that would go to the municipality, I think Senator Bradley expressed the goal. I think we all have the same goal. Whatever the franchise fee is, we wanted a percentage of that to go to the municipality that's hosting the retail facility. I wrote it as 1/15. Obviously, if that number would change to 12.5%, which I would be supportive of. I would support just kind of keeping consistent. But I think the host community who opts in, there was 2 reasons for that. 1, obviously helping the municipality, but 2, it is one of the encouragements for a community to opt in. And then, any impact it has on the community, I think would be something worthy of looking into. In respect to some of the other penalties, I know there was some talk about the residual amount of, and I think it was on page 26 of the original amendment that I filed, 1584. I did to strike any changes to that, but that law would only apply to syringes, residual amount in needles. So we were trying to, we just left it as it is. I'm not sure, I never heard of anyone injecting cannabis, but either way, we're leaving it as it is. We did add something specifically just to be clear that home grow is not permitted under this. Just in case there's any word that there's a lot of different drafts, home grow is not allowed. That's the legislative intent. I can't be any clearer. It also says it in here. I think in respect to I think in respect to the school zones, we did add the word preschool. That was an oversight. I do apologize for. I think that was. I'm not going to take full responsibility for that. I think we all agreed hands down, preschool should have been added, and that was the intent. So we did add that to the definition of it's 2,000 feet from any school that would include a preschool. And then when it came to it's called the non-discrimination question, despite cannabis clearly not being a protected class, but that's what they're calling it. And what passed in the House, and their provision, I believe, starts at the bottom of page 30. They had all these different things. What I did reincorporate back in was one, the disqualification from being able to be a recipient of an organ donation. We left that in. We did leave in that it couldn't be the sole basis of denying a person custody or visitation with their kids. We put that back in. And then we put I added in the professional licensure protection, referencing in cases of an attorney, a CPA, an architect, someone who's offering their fiduciary advice to, whether it's a cultivator, a franchise, whatever, the lawyer wouldn't lose their license for providing legal advice. A lot of states, they pass ethical rules that because your advice is technically violating the federal law, but they did actually, we would protect them, protect the CPA, stuff like that. So we did add that part back in. We didn't put the whole section back in. So to put it pretty clear, I think there's some parts in Senator Bradley's amendment that I would consider. I mean, again, we get all three of these. Mine was available right around 11:45, so that's when I got my copy. So we're doing the best we can with the time we got. But I know which one I'm going to support,
Okay.
and I know which ones I won't.
Are there any questions on Amendment 1833? Yes, Senator Rosenwald.
I guess I should just point out that both Senator Evis's amendment and the one I presented incorporate a number of Senator Bradley's suggestions from the public hearing. I didn't go over them because they were not differences between our two amendments, and I didn't know there was going to be a third amendment.
Okay. Senator Gannon.
Just a real quick question. It's not really differentiating between your bills. If an ATC becomes a retail store, so you and I often discuss potency limits. So the higher potencies that an ATC can sell, 40, 50% concentrations and stuff, are they now going to be limited to are they going to have a separate store or something? I just didn't pick up that part. So are they going to be limited to the same 10%, I think you were saying, 10 or 15% concentration limits? Or are they going to have two different stores selling their higher concentration to therapeutics and retail? Just go over that for me a little.
Thank you for the question, because there's been a slight, I just got this, but it's supposed to be a slight modification to the definition of therapeutic product. So one, it's produced by the ATCs, but it's also, whatever concentration it has exceeds the amount for retail. And that's the definition of a therapeutic product that's in the retail store. Now, that would, in order to purchase that, though, you would have to have a therapeutic license still.
Okay.
That would not be available for any person to buy for recreational use. So it would be in the retail store, and not every franchisee, if they're not comfortable selling a product with that much potency, they're not obligated to. And if the ATCs want, because they're selling something this did come up during the commission hearings, that, they're selling a high potency product, and they weren't sure if they were comfortable that the franchisee would be responsible enough to sell it, which I think if they're going to sell it to the franchisee, that they need to make sure that they're comfortable that the person selling it knows what they're doing. So that's how it would operate. They wouldn't have a separate store.
Okay. So quick follow-up. So they're going to have a strategic advantage if someone wants to get strong stuff. You'll get a therapeutic card, which we may or may not be easy to do. And then anyone could then buy much stronger stuff, but only from ones that were therapeutic dispensaries. The other ones will not have those products.
Well, that's why under what I put forward, and I'm not sure if all the amendments have this, I think they do, that the therapeutic product could be sold out of any franchisee.
Okay.
They all would be, and that was intended to help the patient who wouldn't have to drive as far so they can actually get whatever, whatever it is that they're taking without having to drive, a further distance. Now, with that being said, there's still benefits of the fruits of the labor of being part of the franchise, and hence it should be subject to the franchise fee, just like the retail. Because in some therapeutic products in other states, they allow like discounts if you have this card, or they waive the tax. Now you have to have two registers. It really gets a little dicey, but in reality, there are circumstances where the therapeutic patient and the person buying for retail is taking the same amount. So often the packaging won't even have any distinction whatsoever. Hence another reason why exempting it from the franchise fee can just create some problems.
Final follow-up?
Follow-up?
So any strategic advantage that an ATC would have had by having a stronger product is gone now because they'll all be able to dispense therapeutic cannabis.
Well, I wouldn't
If
say
they
it's
choose
gone because now they have more distribution outlets.
Okay.
So having more points of distribution, what they were saying is most people would just go to the place that's closest to them, whether it's the retail store or the ATC. So this kind of was intended to protect them. But I think it's taking full advantage of that protection by now trying to get around not being subject to that franchise.
Thank you, Cindy.
Okay, are there any further questions on the amendments? Okay. Seeing none, thank you all very much for your amendments. The committee will be in recess until 2:30. committee will come out of recess. Just to refresh everyone's memory, we are still on House Bill 1633, and we were presented with a number of amendments, and we had the individuals who presented those amendments to us walk us through what they were about. The first amendment that we're going to take up is Senator Abbas's amendment, which is Amendment 1833S. Do you have a motion, Senator Abbas?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to move to, for ought to pass on Amendment 2024-1833S.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Senator Chandler. Okay, is there any discussion on the ought to pass motion, Senator Rosenbaum?
Thank you. I wonder if we could consider a committee amendment of changing one word. And that is changing in the municipal revote section, may to shall.
Okay, could you point out the page and line number?
It's page,
I think it's page 23, line 1, would be my guess.
23 line 1.
So you want, it reads,
no,
Yes, it is. 23 line 1. And my thinking is that if the voters petition their governing board for another chance to vote on the question, the governing board should not be able to just ignore the voters of the town.
Senator Chandler?
sorry, thank you. I just want to make sure I'm in the right place because page 23, line 1 does have a shall, but it's a different reference. I don't know if I'm looking at the right.
I'm looking at the Abbas amendment.
Correct, and that
Finding all these
is,
amendments confusing?
Got it. Got it.
23.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm good. I got it.
And I hope Senator Abbas would support that motion.
And if I can ask, can you explain why it should be a shall versus a may?
Because I don't think the governing body of a municipality should be able to ignore a petition of the voters on this question alone when they don't on other questions. Just this morning, in Ways and Means, we were executing a bill that had to do with a local option for charitable gambling, and the same kind of language was in the bill. But again, if the municipality said no to gambling, and then in a subsequent year, 5% of the voters signed a petition asking for a revote, it would be put back on a subsequent ballot.
So just to clarify, you believe what's as written in the amendment that I moved forward, that even if the 5% of the voters were to sign the petition to put it back on the ballot because it failed once already, that the municipality could just ignore that petition and not put it on there? Couldn't they do that with any warrant article?
I don't think they could do that if it said shall. But I think they certainly could do it if it says may.
I can't support that.
I'm just asking for interpretation purposes. Does anyone?
No, I'm just saying that I cannot support that because you're requiring, and I'm looking on page 22, beginning with line 27, that the voters of every municipality shall vote on whether to allow cannabis retail stores. They've taken a vote, and if they say no, that vote needs to be respected. Not, well, okay, we get to take, well, it failed, well, we're going to try this again. No, there's no time limits. If they want to try it again in another year, that's fine. But the way that this reads, and you're looking at section 2, beginning on line 1, a municipality where a vote to allow cannabis establishments fails may propose, but there's no time frame in there. It could be a week after the election. It could be a month. It could be a year. I strongly support the municipality. If they take a vote and they say, absolutely not, we don't want this in our community, that needs to be respected. As opposed to saying, oh, well, it didn't work, so we're gonna try again in another month. We're gonna hold a special election. I don't think that's a good way to do. I think that's bad faith, and it disrespects the votes of the municipality. So I can't support changing that. I would prefer that it not even be in there at all.
Well, I respectfully disagree. That could be in a month because there'd have to be another election.
Mhm.
So it probably would be in a year. And in fact, in a city, it would be in 2 years, probably, unless a city decided to have a special municipal ballot at a state election. But cities and towns don't just have votes every month. I just think that the governing body of a town should respect that voter sentiment might change over time. If you wanted to say no less than a year later, I'd be okay with that, but this just allows the governing body to ignore the voters.
Perhaps, I know Senator Bradley's amendment had a minimum waiting period of 3 years to come back. So maybe if we use the shall language, but we had the 3-year period where it can be brought back.
Why doesn't even, it's, the way that this reads, it says may propose. And I agree with you, Senator, most municipalities have one election a year. So they could propose it the next year. So why do we even need this section? Because, I mean, I don't want to say you cannot bring it back next year, or if 3 years, you have to wait 3 years. If people want to vote on it every year, the municipality, that's their right to do so. I just don't think that we need to, this section isn't needed, so that's all. Senator Chanley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, again, I think we could get hung up on a lot of things, but I do respect the proposal to ask for shall here, because we generally, our governing bodies in our municipalities are required to respond to petitions from voters. And this, and correct me if I'm wrong anyway, but as I read this, it says, to file it with the Secretary of State within the time frame regulating other ballot measures for municipal elections, which would seem to me that that is, in fact, the 1 year in most municipalities. And if I'm wrong about that, please let me know. But I think the shall just says the governing body cannot reject the petition of the voters. And I think it does limit it to 1 year. So that's all.
If I can, and again, just point out, beginning on line 27 on page 22, this says shall. And this is a one-time shall. We're going to offer it, that's it. But if they say no, we need to respect the fact that they've said no. And if anybody wants to bring it forward the next year, they can have a petition. And every petition, if they have the required numbers of signatures will be placed on the ballot. That is the existing procedure today. Why are we dictating that this one issue shall be entertained every year or at every election? This is what I don't understand. We respect the votes of the municipalities, but with this particular issue, why? Are we saying to them, well, you shall do this every year upon petition? Let the municipalities decide on their own whether or not they're going to do this. They're going to take a vote. We're requiring one vote. And that's it. Nothing else. After that, it's up to them. If they decide they want to have a facility in their community, they can work on it in their community, get the petition, the number of signatures, and put it on the ballot, and then they can argue at the municipal level. Why are we dictating that they shall? You're going to do it once, that's it. That's all you need to do. We shouldn't be dictating that this will be coming up every year.
Madam Chair, I'm not sure about every town's rules here, but for this to come up again, it would require the petition to be signed by 5% of the legal voters. So
Correct.
I'm not sure if I'm not sure if every town has such a high requirement for each warrant article. So this may offer some additional protection of it just popping up out of nowhere. Getting 5%, it seems like a small number on paper, but I mean, the turnout for some of these municipal elections is, they're much lower. Not lower than 5%, but it's not,
My question is, why are we putting our finger on this issue, when we don't do it with other issues?
I think that Senator Rosenwald's concern is that if there's a petition, the governing body will say, no, we're not having an election. I don't know where that authority would come from in any sort of general election sense. But what I would read, if you replace may with shall on line 1 of page 23, is a requirement that a municipality that said no have an election the next year. It says, a municipality where a vote to allow cannabis establishment fails shall propose the question to voters again. And I think what Senator Carson is saying is there's no requirement that they propose it. And in some of the bills, I believe there has been a requirement that it be held, get a second run at it at the next election. Yeah. But rather what Senator Carson is proposing is that the ordinary rules pertain. If 5% of the people ask for it, the governing body has to put it to the voters. And I'm not aware of anything that would give the governing body authority to say no to a petition brought by 5%.
So,
Yes,
as I say, I think this is consistent with language that comes in other bills. And in fact, what just came up in Ways and Means this morning on, what happens if a municipality says no to charitable gambling. There was a section of, well, what happens if it fails? Well, then if there's a petition of 5%, it shall be put to the voters again. So I see this as just consistent with how votes to allow or not allow things occurs. I think this Roman 2 has been in this bill from probably the beginning.
I think Rick had something to say, and then we'll have Senator Abbott.
Well, I'm just looking at the Keno statute, which has been in place for several years and was the big local option thing I can think of. And that uses a may reference to a town that fails the vote the next time, the last time. Mm-hmm. That's 284:51.
so if the concern is that elected officials at the local level are going to ignore their duty, they have much bigger problems on their hands than cannabis. I would tell you that. And there's bills in here, Madam Chair, that you may not necessarily support, but you still open the hearing and you go through the process, right? We still do it. Senate President, no exception, right? The Speaker of the House is a bill they may not like. We open the hearing. That's how it does. If an elected official is not going to do their duty, well, I would leave it to they can't get that on the ballot, maybe when that person's up for reelection, they should get voted out. Because it sounds like they're just willfully not doing their sworn duty, so maybe we just leave it May as it is for now. I'm not, yeah, I understand the point that's been made. If the keynote language is the same, maybe we just keep it as it is for now. This can be revisited. The earliest, if this were to become law, the earliest that anything will be on the ballot is going to be, this issue is not going to come up for at least 2 years, right? But I would get a year and a half. So, and if that town's not doing their duty, then we'll cross that bridge then. But, in respect to this amendment, otherwise, I'll just say, and I say this sincerely to the topic of cannabis. I don't believe there's such thing as a great cannabis policy. I think things some are worse than others. All I'm looking at here is, we are kind of surrounded by these operations, especially in the southern part of the state. So I'm not by any means saying that any benefits of this amendment outweighs the potential negative impacts. I just think that, and my colleague, I think some of us, we all are in the southern part of the state, south of Concord. So I think a lot of the negative impacts we're dealing with without having any control over what's happening. So is this a huge win for the state? I'm not saying that. I have concerns right now because what we're dealing with, we can't control. We can't control what they do in Maine. We can't control what they do in Vermont, and we can't control what they do in Massachusetts. I know in Haverhill, literally in Haverhill, if you're in the parking lot, if you look across the street, it says, "Welcome to New Hampshire." There's literally the sign right there. So that's a main road. It's 125. And if you're driving from Atkinson to Placer, you cut into Massachusetts for a very small period of time, and there it is. So you drive by there's New Hampshire plates in the parking lot. So a lot of the problems that can come from this, I think we're already dealing with it. I'm not sure we're necessarily solving problems, but at least we're going to have some control over it. And this was my best effort to mitigate some of those negative impacts as much as I could. I think having liquor could be involved in the enforcement process, particularly having a law enforcement agency that will have a directive to deal with the black market. You hear about these states with black market problems. They talk about it and they do nothing, which I'm not sure why they're talking about it if they're not going to do anything. On day one, we'll have a law enforcement agency that will be, as part of their directive, would deal with this, the black market issue. So I think that's an advantage we'll have. And I think some of the other states went too fast. Massachusetts has like over 300 stores. And they're wondering why, and they say, oh, not all these retailers are profitable. Look what happens over there. I think what we're doing is we're doing this very, very slow. Some are saying too slow, but I'd rather be criticized for going too slow than criticized for going too fast. So I'm going to support the pass as amended, and I hope my colleagues join me.
Yeah, I just need to correct something I said about the keynote statute because I've had a little more chance to look at it. It's actually structured very differently than this language. And first of all, it separates towns and cities into two parts, which I think makes sense in a lot of ways. But what it says is the legislative body in a city may vote to place the question on the official ballot, or the governing body shall place the question on the ballot upon receipt of 5% vote. So I just want to make sure that was clear.
Which is why I proposed that change.
So you tell me that after that great speech, then you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't think that the legislative body should ignore a petition from the voters. It doesn't say it has to be the next election. It says a subsequent election. So the governing body could say, we're not putting it on the state primary ballot, well, it's from a city. We're not, we'll put it on we'll do a special ballot on the state general election, or we'll wait another year for the municipal election. So I don't think it's overly directive, but I just don't think they should ignore their own residents.
I can just inquire, so to maintain consistency, does it need to say may or shall? I guess is the question, without taking any position on the policy.
The way the amendment is proposed now, it creates the impression the municipality shall propose the question to voters again. Instead of saying, if there's a petition, it shall be on the ballot.
If I could, Madam Chair, it does say
Upon a petition.
upon a petition. So there has to be the petition, and that petition has to be at least 5%. So they don't have to do it unless there's a valid petition. I think we probably spent more time on this one than,
I think we're all trying to accomplish the same thing, but I'm hesitant to change it to shall without, I think the problem is the whole section may need to be redrafted to make more sense. So that may appear in a floor amendment later, but I think for the sake of what we're doing now, I'm more comfortable leaving it. But I would be open to correcting that. I mean, this will go to finance, and so that's gonna be fun in there if it were to pass. And
I'd be happy to work with you on a floor amendment.
but I think maybe just making sure, because I think what the Keno law is written is we would have to rewrite this. I think doing it on the fly might be too much to do.
I think consistency is important. I'm looking at this going down to line 19. It says, in a municipality that voted to permit cannabis establishment, if they have a zoning ordinance, it shall consider adoption. We have to do, it seems like we're having to jump through a lot of loops for this. And it's affecting municipalities. And I don't believe we had anybody who testified on behalf of the municipalities about this. Because I'm sure there are a lot of municipalities that do not want this in their community, much like when we proposed the ATCs. Many communities across the state did not want these in their communities. And we're taking that option away from them. I don't feel comfortable with this amendment, and there are a lot of other issues. But I think, we all need to discuss it. I won't be supporting it. I also agree with my good friend, Senator Gannon, that when the ATCs came to us, we were both here, and it was with the promise that the ATCs were only going to be selling medicinal marijuana. And here we are today, expanding that. And I just kind of like, okay, what happened? It's just that it's problematic. I think there's a lot of issues that need to go. I agree that this should go slowly. There's a lot of moving parts to this. We want to make sure that we do the very best we can for the people of the state of New Hampshire, and quite frankly, anyone who wants to come here and do business in the state of New Hampshire. I just think this is going too fast. We only saw this amendment today, and I would have liked a lot more time to look at each one of these amendments, time that we just did not have available to us. So.
I agree. It would have been a lot easier if we had one amendment rather than three, but that's how it is. Just what I would point out with the municipalities, they still have to opt in, all right? So no community is forced to actually allow a retail store. And even if they have an existing ATC in the municipality, that municipality still has to opt in to retail. every community has to do it. We thought putting on the ballot, just requiring it to be in the ballot at the municipal election would allow the commission to kind of really strategize where these would go by knowing which communities opted in, which ones opted out. So that, you don't want to have some communities that they delay it for whatever reason. They didn't put it on the ballot, then all of a sudden it's on the ballot. We kind of wanted to make sure they kind of knew at the same time, all right, you had your municipal elections, this is the result. So they could do the best job they can.
Senator, I appreciate all the work that you did on this, but I'm kind of an open market kind of person. And we're putting, again, your finger here and saying, we're going to give preference to this here. It just completely disallows a New Hampshire business, a New Hampshire grower, all of these folks that could participate in this. And we're just saying, no, this is just going to be here. I just don't think this is the right way for us to go. So, and again, I'm one vote.
Yeah, Madam Chair,
Are gonna decide
I
what
actually
you're gonna
agree with you 99% of the time. I think you're right. On this one, the reason why I disagree is we don't want that marijuana mine. And having this be very clear and restricted where they can go and how far is to avoid. And we've seen other states where that's been a negative. And it's not just bad for that community, but it's the surrounding. Not everyone wants to operate next to a cannabis store either. So, if you ever notice, a lot of them are in standalone buildings for a reason. And that's not a coincidence. And it's because the other tenants may not want to be in there. So there is other things that we're taking into consideration by not having a lot of them.
Senator, I agree with you. I don't want to see that kind, like a marijuana mile activity either. But I don't think we should be picking winners and losers. If we're going to have this type of activity in New Hampshire, if a municipality takes a vote and they want to welcome this type of activity, I think we should be talking to anybody who's interested, not just an ATC or selling through an ATC. We shouldn't be doing that because I'm sure that there are businessmen and women that would like to come into the state of New Hampshire and engage in this kind of activity as well. Whether they're it's a big business or a smaller business. I just think that we should be open and welcoming to anybody and consider them, and they're not considered in this. And that's my concern. So, okay. Are there any further questions on amendment number 1833S? Are we ready to vote? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay, so this amendment passes 3-2. Okay, so we're not going to take up the other amendments since we already have one. Unless, do you want to take up your amendment, Senator Rosenwald? All right. Okay, so you are moving amendment 1840S. Is there any discussion on amendment 1840S? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so that amendment fails. Okay, so we are now down to the bill itself. So is there, we have an ought to pass motion on House Bill 1633. We moved it for discussion purposes, but it's been amended. Is there anyone who would like to make a motion?
It's ought to pass.
You want not to pass this amendment?
Ought to pass as
There
amended.
you go.
Okay, so we have a motion of ought to pass as amended. Seconded by Senator Rosenwald. Is there any further discussion on the amendment?
On the bill.
Do you need?
Just for 30 seconds.
Sure, that's okay.
Madam Chair, so the discussion will be on the bill as amended?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
I can go now, if you want.
No,
Or no,
no,
we can
Senator
wait.
Rosenwald
Oh, okay.
has to do something out in the
Okay.
hallway, so we just
Sure.
have to, we're in the voting mode. Okay. We have a motion about to pass as amended. Is there any further discussion? Senator Gannon?
Yep. I appreciate Senator Abbas's trying to make a bad bill better, but I've always been taught if you got a bad bill, it's not going to help the state. It's not going to do anything. Maybe you're going to keep bad things from getting out of control. But underlying it, what are we doing? You're going to add 16 more stores selling it, a product that's going to get us our citizens high. So we already have this in medicinal use. I learned, and I'm fine with it medicinally. I don't like the potency that they have and how they sell it at ATCs. I think that should be more regulated, but that's fine enough. But now we're adding it, so it's going to, we have a lot of citizens who drive vehicles, drive buses, work with heavy equipment. They're going to be employees who are going to go to work under the influence of THC. It's going to hurt families. It's going to hurt kids. It's going to send a green light to the kids in New Hampshire. Not so bad. They got it everywhere. It's just like a beer. Just do it. And so now we're going to have twice as much of a bad product in the sight of the kids. And it's not a good look. It's not good for the state. I know a lot of people who've come to Boston from Philadelphia. And the one thing they notice is when they're walking from Faneuil Hall to the Seaport District all around, they're like, they've never smelled any city with THC as much as in Boston. I don't think we need to bring it to New Hampshire. I think we can be a state that doesn't have it. We've dealt with the medicinal marijuana. I think we've done that quite well. I think we should draw the line there. We do not have to do what our neighbors do. I want to be New Hampshire, not Massachusetts. That's where I am. So that's why I'll be a no vote. But I thank you for your efforts.
Hey, are there any further comments? Senator Abbas, do you have something you'd like to say?
I will say that's why they having a public use prohibition with a second offense is a unclassified misdemeanor is to attempt to deter that public use smoking. Because I agree, if you walk through Boston, New York, my family's in New York City, it is outrageous. And having these penalties are less than some parking tickets is inappropriate because someone's going out of the way to violate the law. So I'm hoping that this will deter that behavior. I'm really putting my trust in law enforcement to enforce that. And that's the other reason is anything they have on them cannabis would be subject to forfeiture as well, in addition to the violation misdemeanor. They have to surrender everything that they have.
One quick follow-up.
Follow-up?
So one thing I'm very concerned with is I work a lot, as you know, with the police and doing legislation. And so what I've really saw this year and the last year is they're showing me multi-use of alcohol and THC products has gone up. We had a driver fall asleep on 93 about a month ago. It's just a big problem out on the roads. Then I talked to we share the same county attorney. She tells me they don't really even try to prosecute these things. It's very hard to prosecute when they're under THC. It's just not like a DUI where you get a .08. So where we haven't even got that under control, kids are aware that it's going to be very hard to prosecute them under. Well, there are ways around it, but it's very bad for drivers. They're much more likely to get impaired now and know that they probably can't prosecute me. I can get a good lawyer like Darrell Abbas, and he can get me off because it's not a definable term. We can't test that THC. Do you not see our resulting deaths going up on the road once we legalize? Do you see that?
So I'll tell you this, you named a couple of examples that are happening already in the state without it being even legalized. And you're correct. One of the problems that no one wants to talk about is you can be under the legal limit for alcohol, but if you mix that with THC, they both, from my understanding, intensify the effect. So you even may be under the legal limit for alcohol, but be more impaired because of the mixing. One of the things we did do is we don't allow any alcohol-infused THC beverages, but that's the exact reason why we did that. I guess it's happening already. When it comes to the field sobriety test, whether this passes or not, whether cannabis is ever legalized or not, I think it's important that a field sobriety test is developed. And I know they're trying, but they haven't been able to do it yet. Because again, to me, that's public safety concern that should be addressed. We don't allow any use inside of a vehicle at all. It's not permitted. Even the passenger can't be using it inside the vehicle. So we did, and that violation would not have any impact on your sobriety. And for people who show up at work high, whether it's legal or not, if an employee of mine showed up stoned, they probably get suspended if not fired. I think that's a fair thing, fair assumption. So that's up to the employer. If regardless of this passes, if their employees are showing up on anything that's impairing their mind, I'm surprised they would keep them on staff.
Follow?
Follow-up?
So you're saying that there is a problem out there as far as driving. And so now, are we not going to exasperate the situation by adding 16 stores selling a large quantity of marijuana? And now we have a big problem that you already said is a problem that we don't know how to deal with at the moment. So aren't we putting the cart before the horse? Shouldn't we get that under control before we legalize?
I guess I'll ask you this question. I don't mean to answer your question with a question, but have you sat and observed these cannabis stores that are less than a quarter mile from the borders of New Hampshire, and you look at the license plates, and they all say most of them say live free or die on it. The one in Salisbury, I mean, I didn't go to every single one. I did the one in Haverhill, and I looked at the one in Salisbury, and I just kind of sat there 15 minutes and observed, and you can see the cars pulling in and out, So
So you asked me a question, I'll answer it. Yes, I'm aware of the one in Haverhill that you talked about. It's near my high school, from my district. And I don't think adding another one going up in Raymond and another one further up, deepening into the state, spreading this more. I can see it's a problem in your district. I don't think we need to spread it to the rest of the state. But thank you for your answers and thank you for trying.
Are there any further comments? I'd like to refer all of us back to the testimony that we had received on this bill. The majority of the testimony was not in favor of this. We heard from individuals that struggled with cannabis abuse disorder and how it affected their lives. Why would we be encouraging this? Why? We heard from doctors that are talking about seeing increases in young people, especially young men, in mental health disorders. We can't dismiss that. You just can't say, oh, well, and move on. We can't. We're starting to see more and more and more of this. We're seeing young people showing up at hospitals who have taken too much. We're seeing older people who have taken the gummies, the candies, and didn't realize that it contraindicated medication that they're currently taking for their health. But what really impressed me were the young people that showed up that talked about their friends in high school. Now, these are kids. These are not legally adults. This we're talking about legalization for adults. But kids are getting their hands on this stuff as well. So why are we sending the message to these young people that, well, it's okay, if you become an adult, you can do this. We know it's going to be in their hands. We talked about, public smoking. How are the police going to be able to enforce that? Are there enough people? Enough police officers are going to be doing that? We hear all the time, well, they should be doing something more important. They should be catching bank robbers and, murderers and rapists. They're going to stop somebody because, they're smoking outside? People don't care. I think I mentioned that I went to Toronto last summer. Absolutely beautiful city on Lake Ontario. All you smell is marijuana. People are openly smoking as they're walking down the street. They don't care. So I see that as unenforceable. How are you going to enforce that? Municipalities are going to say, hey, we need more police officers to enforce this. And that we have enough difficulty finding people going into law enforcement today. So why are we creating these situations? I looked at the testimony from the Atkinson Police Department, and what struck me was how he talked about the quality of life and how that's going to affect the quality of life of the people living here in New Hampshire. And he's very concerned about it because he's seen it in Massachusetts. Why would we bring that here? Why would we open the door and say, come on in? Both my good friend Senator Abbott and Senator Gannon discussed this idea about, oh, well, people have to go to Massachusetts. Well, if you want it bad enough, go to Massachusetts and buy it. Go to Maine, go to Vermont, go to Canada. But why do we have to do it here? Why would we change our quality of life because somebody wants marijuana? Why? I can't imagine somebody, hey, we're going out on we're going up to the lake, we're going camping. You want to enjoy what New Hampshire has to offer, but the people in the camping spot next to you just decide they're going to smoke marijuana all weekend. And it destroys your experience. And again, where does someone's rights begin and someone else's ends? I just don't see this as a positive move forward. We also hear about money. Oh, we're going to make money. Okay, let's look at other states. Have they produced the kind of funds that they were originally promised? I've talked to legislators from Colorado who said, if we had to vote on this today, I'd vote no. I'd say no, absolutely not. This has not improved the quality of life. My daughter goes to Colorado quite a bit for her work. Flying into Denver, what's the first thing you do when you get off the plane? All you smell is marijuana in the airport. People are, it's like, why do we get tied up around the axle on this? It's not going to produce enough money, as promised. And if you want it, you can just go across the border and get it and drive home. Hopefully you're not taking it as you're driving because we have no way to know if somebody has done this. There's no way that you can find out. You can think, the car might smell if they've been smoking, or they might have a physical affect that you can look at. But of course, that's going to be challenged in court. And how is law enforcement going to prove? I just don't see why we need to do this. Someone, please tell me why. Because we're live free or die, it's my right to do this? Really? I just don't see this. So, Senator Abbott and then Senator Chandler.
And I don't mean to try to sugarcoat this by any means, but I'm going to give it a slight attempt here. One thing I will say with the public use is that what's in this amendment is stricter than what the existing law right now is in New Hampshire. Right now, it's just simply a violation, and it's based on how much you are possessing. The public use part of it is it's just simply decriminalized. So this actually is a harsher penalty for public use if this were to pass. Again, will that necessarily mean there'll be less public use with legalized? I'm not sure that that's fair to say, but trying to mitigate that as much as I can. And the chief's testimony from Atkinson was, I did weigh it heavily because he's right about the quality of life, and I would hope that the police try to maintain the quality of life that we have, and I hope they do enforce the law. That's what I hope they do.
Thank you for your comments. Senator Chandler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You asked a question, and I really have to say, I think that we as a society agree that there are drugs which we accept can be used for recreational purposes. We have that going on every single day in our state. People use drugs that are legal and approved for recreational purposes. And in fact, you mentioned the chief from Atkinson who talked about people consuming alcohol and suggested that the consumption of alcohol did not have an effect on other people's lives. But of course it does if it's too much. And we also know that our constituents the vast majority of our constituents believe that cannabis should not be illegal. This bill responds to that desire with guardrails and structure. And I do hope that we continue to work on this, improve it, and have a very good bill that the people of our state have asked us to provide.
Thank you. Are there any further comments? I just say one, as my good friend Senator Gannon said, once that you open the door and you go out, it's going to be hard to put it back in. And we struggle with young people getting hold of alcohol. Why are we doing this? Why? People say they want it. Well, if they want it, they can go to Massachusetts. If they want it, they can go to Vermont. If they want it, they can go to Maine. We also forget that this is a Schedule I drug classified by the federal government. And we're putting the state of New Hampshire in direct conflict with the federal government. And we know in that fight, it is our constituents who are going to be the ones who are going to lose. We don't have the luxury of ignoring federal law. We take an oath to uphold our state and federal constitution, our laws. Why, in this instance, are we choosing to ignore federal law? The federal government they don't prosecute people unless someone's dealing a large quantity of marijuana. But the federal government is turning a blind eye to it. I've always said, look, if you want the states to be able to sell this, change the law, change the federal law, declassify it. And we know that our president has discussed taking it from a Schedule I to a Schedule II or III, but that's only for medicinal marijuana. That is not for recreational use. Why are we putting our police officers in an untenable position of creating laws that they're not going to be able to enforce? Why are we doing that? It makes no sense. It really and truly makes no sense whatsoever. But we have a motion here on this bill, ought to pass as amended. I think we've probably said more than we've discussed this a little more than what we had originally intended. So I think everyone's ready to vote. So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No.
Nay.
Okay, Senator Abbas, this is yours. Why don't you take this one out? Yeah, we had a long way to go. We got a lot of bills to do. Senator, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
We've moved, ought to pass on House Bill 306, 5-0, and it will go on the regular calendar, and I will take this one out. Okay, now we have bail reform. Okay, there is there's an amendment, where'd it go? Yes, it is amendment 1748S. I'd like to move on to pass, seconded by Senator Gannon. What I'd like to do is to walk you through the two versions and the changes that we've made, and what this amendment does. In the House version, Section 1 creates a magistrate system. Section 2 requires individuals to be seen within 24 hours of the arrest, including on weekends and holidays. If the court is not open, the decision on bail should be made by the magistrate. Section 3 adds magistrate to various parts of the law. Section 4 adds magistrate to various parts of the law. In the amendment, it strikes Section 1, Section 2, Section 3, and Section 4. We begin with Section 5. We strike, the amendment strikes references to magistrates, the 24-hour hearing requirement with no exceptions, and requiring cash bail to be set at an amount the defendant can meet. It also adds the list of crimes for which someone must be seen before a judge or magistrate before being released on bail. It removes the substantial evidence standard of proof. And it adds a presumption that if someone has missed court 3 times in 3 years, there is a rebuttal presumption that release will not reasonably assure the appearance of the person as required. Section 6 strikes the mandated creation of an electronic monitoring program and replaces the language with amendment from the counties that has no cost. Let's see. Section 8 is stricken because it reflects Section 7. Section 9, there's no change, so that means we will, we support the amendment supports the $750,000 for developing and implementing the electronic system to share bail status with law enforcement, and provides $986,000 to the judicial branch for them to create a bail data platform that will enable data sharing with law enforcement and ensures that these sections will not lapse. Section 10, there's no change from the House version, which increased bail commissioner fees from $40 to $60. Section 11 updates the bail commissioner statute to no longer require the defendant to pay the bail fee directly to the bail commissioner. It requires the court to pay the bail commissioner the fees as authorized by RSA 597:20 each month. Does not require indigent defendants to repay the court their fee. It allows the court to provide the defendant with extensions for repayment as necessary, and ensures reimbursement of bail commissioner fees are not retroactive to the effective date of this section. And Section 12 is the same language, except it replaces Chief Justice of the Superior Court or the Administrative Judge of the Superior Court or the Circuit Court with the judicial branch. And let's see what else we have. Okay, Section 13, there's minor changes to the judicial training coordinator language, and it removes the training mandate. Section 14, no changes from the House section. 15, no changes from the House section. Section 16 provides funding for the bail commissioner fees and ID cards, and then it provides these funds are non-lapsing. Section 17, there's a new Senate section providing that knowingly breach of bail conditions can either be contempt of court or a prosecution for a Class A misdemeanor breach of bail. And Section 18, the appropriations section shall take effect July 1st, 2024, and the remainder of this act shall take effect January 1st, 2025. Those are the changes that we have presented in amendment number 1748S. Is there any discussion?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Senator Chandler.
Thank you. So I guess, may I ask a question?
Sure.
I'm trying to understand, one of the major parts of the HB 318 as it came to us was the magistrate positions. Why would you remove that? What's the rationale in your amendment?
Thank you. It was the cost. We're not in a budget year. We're not in a budget year. And this is an extremely expensive proposition. And there were a lot of concerns about how are we gonna pay for this and where's the money gonna come from? So that's why, those sections were taken out.
And if I might ask one more question?
Sure.
On the amendment, page 1, line 21, it says the preponderance of evidence, and I believe the original bill had substantial evidence, and I
think Senator Abbas wants to answer that one.
okay.
So depending on where you looked under New Hampshire's various laws, substantial evidence might have actually been a lower standard than preponderance of the evidence. So there was some concern by having such a low standard. That's not the direction I think anyone was intending to go. So the issue is, should it be clear and convincing evidence or preponderance of the evidence? And I think clear and convincing evidence was going to be, I think that was it was difficult to come to that agreement. Personally, these are violent offenses. So I'm okay with the preponderance of the evidence. I think that's a good standard to use here. The case that's been thrown around to try to claim it's constitutionally required to be clear and convincing evidence, I don't agree with that representation that it is. I think it's that holding was limited to that particular, it had to do with the interpretation of that bail chapter at the time. So then to apply that as a universal policy, I want to say it says right in there that it's meant to only apply to that particular chapter that it was interpreting at the time. So I think preponderance of evidence is the right standard to use.
Mr. Lehman, do you want to weigh in on the difference between the two?
Well, I think it's parsing things a little thin for language that we really don't have sort of odds or a percentage to go on. It's not a level of evidence that courts are familiar with or have developed a history of applying. The House passed version states that it's somewhere between a preponderance and clear and convincing evidence. But there's just not a lot of history to fall back on to figure out whether it leans towards one or the other, or how you apply that. I would also add that there's really two different things being assessed. There's the quantum of evidence that's proven, person missing court on prior occasions, acting violently in the past, having domestic violence or other type things on their record. There's the quantity of proof that those things happened, and then there's a quantity of proof of future dangerousness going forward when somebody's out. And I think it's hard establishing the likelihood of future dangers is a complicated business. I think it's hard to do, particularly when you introduce to that calculation this standard of evidence that is more or less unknown to the law. Because I think it's easy to prove by clear and convincing evidence the underlying facts upon which a determination is judged, prior convictions, those kind of things are very easy to prove by clear and convincing evidence. Trying to hold a court to a heightened standard of future dangerousness, though, I think is difficult.
Senator Rosenwald?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate your bringing up the cost of the magistrates. But that section becomes effective January 2nd, 2025.
Mm-hmm.
We could easily push that to July 1st of 2025.
Yes.
And then we would not have a problem of doing that in the middle of the
Yeah,
budget.
the
I
amendment,
wonder if you considered keeping the magistrates, that I know House Finance worked really hard
mhm,
to get in there, and simply moving the date for their hire to July 1st of 2025, so that it would not have an impact on this budget.
okay. The court had a lot of concerns about the magisters adding this to their budget. So I just felt more comfortable saying, okay, let's let this sit. We got a lot of feedback to it. We've had a lot of bills here in Judiciary. Yeah, and we just really don't have a lot of time. And I applaud the House. They did a lot of work. I just really don't think the magisterial system is ready to come forward. That's all. And it's better that it is done in a budget year where you can have those discussions. I mean, we'll have this here, we'll push it off, but we don't know what next year's budget's gonna look like. We have no idea. So I would personally, that's why I took it out. It's like, bring it forward as a separate bill next year where you will be discussing just doing this. And that's it, and the cost of it, rather than creating a system here that's got a lot of moving parts with it as well. So, that's just where I am. Senator Chandler?
Do you want to say something?
Oh, could I follow up?
Oh, sure.
Another question. I noticed that instead of having a hearing within 24 hours, your amendment
Mhm.
basically said somebody could be in jail for up to 5 days if it were a
I don't think so.
holiday weekend. That seems like a big jump.
I'm looking at this. I don't think that's the intention. Senator Abbas?
That, under the existing court rules, I want to say well, there's Superior Court and the Circuit Court rule. I think it's Superior Court Rule 4 and Circuit Court Rule 10. I might have those numbers reversed. Anyway, either way, right now that's the current issue, that if you, let's say you get arrested on a Friday night or a Saturday morning, and if you are held, you would be awaiting till Monday, and then that's when actually the time period begins to accrue. So the other problem you face is if Monday's a holiday, but that exists under the current system. That's one of the reasons why they want the magistrate system, but that's a separate problem than the bail laws and procedures and standards that they apply. I am open to having a magistrate system, but I think when you had all these issues with the bail reform, a lot of people are taking the position that it's the bail commissioners that are they're not doing a great job. But I haven't actually really seen any evidence that they're not applying the law correctly, the bail commissioners. If they're applying the law correctly, you can have a judge, you can have a magistrate or a bail commissioner. It's the same outcome. So I think what we're doing here, in considering the fiscal side of things too, we're trying to address the law how it's being applied to deal with what I think is some of the most egregious circumstances, particularly violent crimes against an individual or sex crimes against children. I think those are the worst of the worst, in my opinion. I think we can still put the magistrate system in, and I think there's other advantage to that beyond just the issue of bail. But I agree doing it in a budget year would be the best year to do that. But again, I think changing the law, some of these things may be mitigated. Again, we're just blaming the bail commissioners. I don't think that's fair to do, because if they're applying the law correctly, maybe it's the law that's the problem.
Yeah, some of the things that I know that I've talked to folks about is doing the video arraignments, doing those hearings by video. A lot of states do that, and is that something we should be considering as well? But again, we didn't have a lot of time to really delve into these issues. And these were just, I mean, the creation of the magisterial system, I think, was the big glaring issue here. And I just think that we need to be very cautious about what we're doing. We need the support of the court. I had some concerns about the qualifications of a magistrate. I think that, again, all of these things should be done separately in a bill in a budget year. And that's why I brought the amendment forward. Senator Chandler?
Well, and thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the efforts. I truly do. But I don't think I can support the amendment because I do believe that the magistrate position is essential. I like the bill that came over from the House, the way it was. I have supported our efforts at what I'll call bail reform, the two bills that we had, at least two good bills that we had that we sent over to the House. I appreciate the numerous stakeholders who got together and crafted HB 318 as we received it. And what I do think is important about the magistrate system is that it provides the infrastructure that I think has been lacking in some of the other law we have passed. I think we've talked about that. Certain things that were done. The idea of making sure that people who cannot afford cash bail do not sit in prison simply because they cannot afford cash bail is a good idea. The way we heard that it played out was not good. And I completely want to respond to the municipalities and law enforcement who are facing the problems created. But I think a lot of that was because we didn't make sure that all the tools were in place. The bill as it came to us, as well as your amendment, provide certain training and the appropriation for some of the information sharing. All of that is super important, but I do think the magistrate's position is also important to making sure that we do the right thing and that we go to the House with a bill that can pass, because ultimately our goal is to make a difference and help our communities with a good bail reform bill. So, thank you.
I guess you might want to say I'm a little gun shy about this bill because of how bail reform was originally sold to the Senate. I was here. A lot of promises were made about what was going to happen versus what wasn't going to happen. And this has turned out to be a huge problem. We had the mayor of Manchester come in and talk about this. We've listened to law enforcement talk about the revolving door of individuals that are arrested and then automatically they're turned right back out on the streets. And we've actually heard horror stories about someone being retained, especially for committing a violent crime. They're arrested, they get PR bail, they're out and they go back and reoffend the same victim. We can't get that changed, no matter how hard we have tried. And the House is dug in on these particular violent crimes. They just don't want to change it for whatever reason. And now we are stuck with a really, really bad law that is affecting public safety. But to be placed in a corner and said, we have to adopt a magisterial system, which quite frankly, I don't believe is complete, and needs a lot more work. And we don't even know how much really this thing is actually going to cost. We need to look at it in its totality. And we don't have the time to do it. The House did a lot of work on this. And like I said, I applaud the work that they did, but I don't think that this is ready. I look at the testimony we received from the court. And they're the ones that are going to be responsible for doing this. So I would rather take this, the magisterial system, have more time to really vet this out and see what we can come up with. But there are other things in here, and this is why this is a compromise. Rather than killing this bill outright, there were things in this bill that were really good and that we that are in this amendment that we can agree upon. So hopefully, we can get this passed and we can work with the House to work on things that we agree on. Senator Abbas?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think if we pass this amendment to implement the magistrate system in, whether it's part of HB2 or a standalone next term, would not be incredibly difficult because many of the policies, it would fit into this.
Mhm.
I mean, it just, again, I think I know there's some talk of moving the dates around. I was trying to follow along with that. It's been a long day already. We're on our third bill. But I don't think you can start the magistrate system in the middle of a year. I think I'm not speaking for the court system, but they've been consistently like to start stuff on January 1st, just to kind of, for whatever reason, that's kind of always been one of their preferences. I think just doing it in the middle of the year may be a difficult challenge for the court. I'm assuming that to be the case, if we did that. So I think without having the funding side of it, I think some of the other policies are still important. But I think in the future, we eventually will get this magistrate system put in here.
I would just also like to add that I think that this system can be fleshed out even more. I'd like to see video arraignment be something that we see in every county. I'd like to see the magistrates have more contact with the bail commissioners. And I just don't think we should be doing it this year. We're in a non-budget year. We're talking about a lot of people. I don't remember how many. I think there was at least hiring 10 new people. And then the implementation of the system as well. It's not going to be easy. And I just don't want to do something after the experience we've had with bail reform, that we do something and then all of a sudden we have lots of problems. We have to make sure we know what we're doing here. And I don't feel comfortable.
And it was 15. I think it was the
Yeah.
finance committee that made it 10. So I'm not even sure 10 is
Adequate.
And I think the feeling is that 15 might be the better number if you did this, but again, with it being on budget year, here we are.
So, okay. Are there any further comments or questions? Okay. We have amendment number 1748S. Is there any further discussion? There's an ought to pass motion on the amendment. Okay. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Okay. So, I would like to move ought to pass as amended on House Bill 318.
Madam Chair?
Yes. Is there a second? Seconded by Senator Gannon.
So I do think, as I said, I could not support the amendment. I know that the testimony we had when we had our hearing on HB 318 was very persuasive. It included testimony from both the chief of the Manchester police as well as the mayor of Manchester testified in support. A number of other stakeholders have expressed support for HB 318 as it came to us. I would have been more comfortable passing that bill. I did not support the amendment, but I will support the bill as amended because I do think it's supremely important that we reach some kind of solution to the problem before us. And I hope this does resolve some of the issues. I think we may. I do have some concerns about committees of conference, but that's for a discussion for another time.
Okay. Are there any further discussions on the ought to pass as amended? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, I'm not going to move this on consent. I think there'll probably be discussion. So I will take this one out as well. Okay. Next, we have House Bill 619. I'd like to move ought to pass.
Yes.
Seconded by Senator Gannon. Is there any discussion on House Bill 619?
Yeah.
Okay, Senator Chandler.
House Bill 619, there's a lot that I could say about the bill itself and how it came to us, what it intends to do. But I think the most important thing I can say is that we as legislators should not be engaging in the legislation of the practice of medicine. Science and medicine are always evolving fields. This is a situation in which it's a very, very uncommon, rare situation, and it is one which I think we should not be banning. We should not be disallowing doctors from making referrals. I absolutely believe that this is harmful to families, harmful to the LGBTQ community, and certainly harmful to those who are transitioning their gender.
Okay, thank you, Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with my colleague. I know because I've been married to one for 46 or 7 years, how hard doctors work, how many journals they read every month, how many conferences they go to. You know, they are not only regulated by the Board of Medicine, but they belong to professional societies that set standards of care, and those standards of care and best practices continually evolve. I don't feel like we are in the position to tell doctors how to practice their profession for which they have gone to school and trained for a long time and gotten a license. Thank you.
Okay, are there any further comments? Okay, Senator again, and then Senator.
Sure, I'll be real quick. These are children we're talking about, and these are permanent decisions that they're making. So you can't consent to many things when you're a minor, especially things that are going to be a permanent situation. Senator Whitley brought up a couple times, she had numbers about suicide rates being higher amongst people who didn't get to transition. But yet we had a study that was released to all of us, I believe we all got it, showing that the no convincing evidence that gender-referred youth have statistically significant higher suicide rates as compared to the general population. They found no evidence that medical gender reassignment psychiatric morbidity in young people experiencing gender-related distress. So some of the things that we heard in our committee found totally opposite evidence against. And again, I just refer it to a child not being able to make this decision before the age of 18. Thank you.
Senator Abbas?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the most compelling things about the testimony, and please correct me if I'm wrong, not a single doctor provided testimony really confirming that this type of procedure was medically necessary. I was surprised that no one would testify to that and explain why it's medically necessary for a minor to have this type of surgery. I understand that there's, I'm sure some doctors out there may have thoughts on that, but during our hearing, where was that testimony? So all I heard from the medical community was they don't want the legislator telling them what to do at all. And there's a lot of different industries that feel the same way, that wish they were not regulated by the government. So I don't think that coming in here just telling us, well, you're not a doctor, you're not qualified to be legislating this. I had to vote on bills involving motor vehicles. I'm not a mechanic. I take my car to get the oil changed. But should I excuse myself from those votes? What I was hearing is that we shouldn't get into this. But if it's if that's the case, it's irreversible, as my colleague said. Irreversible. All this is doing is requiring them to reach the age of 18. And I don't think that's an unreasonable policy to have, because it is irreversible. And there are people that started to transition that then, I think the term's detransitioned. You hit the point, but this is the point of no return. And for the people who want to reverse or go backwards, those everlasting effects, they won't be able to have children. There's a lot of consequences to that. So I think if this surgery can be done, waiting till they're an adult, I don't believe is a bad policy at all.
Senator Chandler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The only thing I would add is that I don't think, I would agree with Senator Abbas that we weren't hearing necessarily that surgical procedures are what is needed for gender affirming care. I think what I believe that my role as a legislator is not to affirm or ban a particular procedure, but rather recognize that this is medical practice. And I think that to take this step may prove harmful, and I oppose this bill.
Okay. Yeah, and just because people are watching us, today is the annual Rock and Race, which is to benefit Concord Hospital. And it's going to start at 6 o'clock. So it is now 4. And we will be blocked in that whole time. Yeah, I know. Like,
Blocked in.
I gotta go.
I had to pick up David
Yeah.
Cody, and they tried to not let me drive down
Yeah, so,
the street.
yeah. So let's be aware, I think probably just be aware of the time, so we can get folks out of here. Okay, so we have House Bill 619. Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay, Senator Abbas will take this one out. Okay, hopefully we can move through the rest of these. The next bill is House Bill 1189. I'd like to move ought to pass. I also have an amendment, which is amendment number 1776. Is there, oh, it's not on your list?
No, it wasn't, but I should have told you that in committee.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
You were
Do you
doing
want
it.
to, do you feel comfortable? We heard it on Tuesday. I think it was Tuesday. Yeah, it doesn't. Well, we can hold it if you guys want to. I just figured it was just a one-word change to the amendment, but we can hold that one. Yep, not a problem. Next we have House Bill 1192. And we do have an amendment, so for purposes of discussion, Senator Abbas has amendment 1661S. Is there a motion on the underlying bill?
We're on 1192,
Yep.
interim study.
Oh, okay, well,
If we,
I can move.
I was gonna say, if we can do not pass to discuss the amendment, I mean.
Sure, sure.
okay,
I'm sorry.
I
so,
understand there's some concerns with it, but I just think explaining.
Okay.
yeah, okay, so Senator Abbas moves ought to pass for purposes of discussion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Senator Gannon. And we have amendment number 1661S. Senator Abbas, would you like to speak to your?
Yes, and the goal was to really kind of codify what contempt would be in the probate and family court setting. When there's a violation of certain orders, the problem is, let's say someone's an hour later, consistently an hour late for, a parenting schedule, or when they're supposed to exchange the child. The remedy is really, not really existing. But if they were to file a contempt action,
What are you doing?
no, they,
Just keep going.
I
they,
just
they,
see hand motions from beside me. I'm like, what's going on?
they do have the ability to recover their legal fees in a contempt action. It does spell out the standard of what it would be. It also says that the court shall award attorney fees if there is a finding in contempt. Don't think that's not always be the best payday for attorneys. Sometimes judges just order a smaller amount. I've been on the wrong end of that on more than one occasion. You know, you'd be there at the course of 3 hours, they give you 1 hour. But it happens. So, but I think having that legal fees really cleared out there, clearly stated in there, would serve as a deterrent for parents to, abide by the parenting plan. Because especially for some of those miscellaneous violations that are difficult to really get a remedy under contempt. When it's child support, alimony, or failure to, sign, a passport form, those, your remedy is you get the contempt order that they sign the form or that they pay the child support. Those have, the remedy is to get the order enforced. But I believe there was some concerns with some of the language used wasn't consistent with some of the other language in the New Hampshire law that we discussed. So I'm a little hesitant to put it forward after that was brought to my attention. So
Okay.
that's where we're at. I think Rick might be better at explaining what that concern was.
Okay. No, I was just gonna refer to the testimony that we had. There was a concern that if we start delineating what contempt is in family court, it could bind the judges. There was a recent Supreme Court case discussed contempt and paying attorney fees and costs associated with multiple motions, but this bill is too prescriptive to deal with the fact-specific patterns that come up in family court. And that's, she noted that, testimony noted that all the remedies are already able to be applied by the judge. My concern with this, and I understand why it's come forward, and if we do hear a lot of children and family law bills, and there are a number of individuals that use the court to batter the other party. And I can see this just getting bogged down in court with, she was a half an hour late bringing me the kids, or he's, complaining because it was 15 minutes, and just going back and forth to the court to argue about this. They already can deal with this, and I understand why this bill came forward, but I don't know if this bill is the solution to the problem.
I think in this.
Senator Abbas?
This amendment was provided to me by a practicing attorney, so I think some of the concerns was on line 7, this is of the amendment. Contempt of court means the undoubted and willful disobedience. Was it the?
That was one of my concerns, yes. Just as on the bail statute, there was a sort of a newly introduced standard. On this one, this is a standard that I couldn't really tell you what it means.
So we might have to replace that word, which I'm not saying I can't do that before this comes up for.
There's always a
There
floor.
may be a floor amendment in the future, but I think for the time being, to put forward something that may create more confusion than solutions especially when I'm trying to put forward a solution. I think I need to do that.
Senator Chanley, did you? Okay. Was it Senator, who made the motion of ought to pass?
I would draw the ought to pass.
Okay, so is there another motion about interim study?
Yep.
So I'll move interim study. Senator Gannon with second. Okay. All right, so, okay. Is there any discussion on the interim study motion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, there's a motion for the consent calendar.
If we can keep it off consent, because if I do come with something,
You can always pull it off consent, Senator.
I get forgetful.
You'll be busy.
So you don't, okay,
I think we have a lot of bills that day in judiciary.
okay, not a biggie. If you don't want it on a consent, we don't have to do that, but you're taking it out. Okay,
I'll take it out. I'll say that I put forward an amendment that wasn't ready for prime.
Okay. Next, we have House Bill 1282 relative to the duration of child support. I'd like to move on to pass.
Second.
Seconded by Senator Gannon. I believe this one was pretty much a house cleaning bill, if I remember correctly. It was just making some changes, making some updates to existing law that needs to happen. So is there any discussion on the ought to pass motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, now is there a consent calendar motion?
So moved.
Senator Abbott moves consent. Is there a second? Second, Senator Chandler. Is there any discussion on the consent calendar motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Senator Chandler, would you like to? Okay. Next, we have House Bill 1295 relative to penalties for criminal violation of the therapeutic use of cannabis. I'd like to move interim study, seconded by Senator Gannon. In light of, are you guys okay? Yeah, in light of the fact that right now, the federal government is looking to declassify medicinal marijuana from class 1 to either 2 or 3. I think anything that we do, we should wait to see. We should just wait to see if this happens and changes can be made to reflect the declassification rather than putting more legislation in. That's all.
And I would point out, I don't believe there's any evidence that anyone's been charged with violating this law. So changing the penalty, usually there's some type of, you base a justification for that without anyone being charged under this. But I will say we just, 1633, there's a comprehensive cannabis policy. Some of these trailing ones, I would say let's proceed with caution, policy aside.
And if I remember correctly, I mean, this is medicinal marijuana. The penalties were put into place because we did not want individuals who were given the marijuana for their own healthcare purposes to be selling it to other people. And that's why the penalty is harsh. And I didn't hear any reason to lessen that penalty other than it's too harsh.
And Madam Clerk, Madam Chair, it seems to be having a deterrent effect. That's why no one's been charged with it.
I think most people, because medicinal marijuana tends to be expensive, that they're gonna keep it for themselves. But anyway, we have an interim study motion. Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, is there a consent calendar motion? Moved by Senator Cannon. Is there a second? Senator Abbott. Okay. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Senator Gannon, you want to do this one? Okay, next we have House Bill 1319. I'd like to move ought to pass. I just briefly speak, I had a bill that I filed that was almost exactly the same, and the House Criminal Justice Committee decided that they were going to kill that bill and in favor of this one because it was coming over here. I don't care who gets the credit for it. The law is good. We need to do this. We need this to protect our citizens. So I'm more than happy to move on to pass. Is there any further discussion on the ought to pass motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Is there a consent calendar motion? Moved by Senator Chandler, seconded by Senator Gannon. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. I'll take this one. Next we have House Bill 1339 relative to background checks during motions to return firearms and ammunition. For the purposes of discussion, I will move on to pass,
Second.
because I believe there's an amendment. Is there one? Is there an amendment to this? I thought there was. Or was there a committee amendment we had talked about?
Yes, there was a committee amendment that we talked about on if I'm on the right bill,
Yes,
return of firearms. If there's not, the idea was that if there's not a clear do not return within 10 days, then whoever holds the firearm shall return them.
okay,
So it's a
so,
may to a shall.
right, so I would like to propose a committee amendment to House Bill 1339, that on line 25 on page 1, the may will be changed to shall. Are we all know what we're doing here? Okay, is there any discussion on the proposed committee amendment? Oh, second by Senator Abbas. Okay, is there any discussion on the proposed committee amendment? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, seeing none, okay. We have House Bill 1339 as amended. The prevailing motion is ought to pass. Is there any further discussion on the bill? Senator Chandler?
Yeah, thank you very much. I still have reservations about this bill. I looked at what had happened. I understand the intent, and I don't necessarily object at all to the intent, but the testimony from the state police really called into question how this would actually work, the practical ways that this would work. I'm very concerned that we may be creating problems, particularly for victims of domestic violence, and I won't support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further comments? Senator Gannon?
Yeah, I think if someone is found not guilty of an offense and you've taken their guns away, 10 days is sufficient. They should have the guns immediately in my world, but I understand they might have to do a NICS check or something. There could be additional reasons, but with all due haste, their guns should be returned.
And just
Senator Abbas?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So what's happening now, what I understand, the person could be in court opposing the order be extended, whether it's, for 1 year, or if it's, this is the first two-party hearing. And then if the order is not extended, the order that took the depriving of the property, they have to now file a motion for a separate hearing, demonstrating that they're now allowed to possess firearms. When there was an active restraining order, they were disqualified. But now that that's been removed, now if the police are aware that person is not allowed to possess firearms, whether they have whatever convictions, then that person, when they go to pick up their firearms, is going to create some more problems for themselves when they get there. They likely would be charged for. My point is, they'll already be in illegal possession of the firearms when they surrender them, because the reason why they were surrendered was the restraining order is no longer there. So the police would be able to figure that out by simply looking at what records they have, especially if they're in state arrest. But I think we're having a separate hearing to give the party notice, especially if they're in the courtroom when the order was terminated. Maybe if they're not in the courtroom, I understand having a separate hearing, but even then the order's still going. So this puts a procedure in place where it's not going to be right away, but it's not requiring what I thought is not really a necessary court hearing.
Mm-hmm. Well, it does say within 10 days, and I think that whenever a domestic violence petition is brought forward, guns are taken away immediately. And the first thing that happens is they go to the person's place of residence, and not only will they take that person's guns, they will take the gun of anybody else who lives in that house. even though they have been not charged with a crime. So they should, if they are found, there's no finding on the petition, the judge dismisses it, they should be able to get their guns back right away. But what this bill says is up to 10 days. Now, we had testimony from, I want to say Captain Muzzy, I want to make sure I got his rank correct, that sometimes it's 20 days or 30 days. That's not acceptable for someone who was charged, found there's no finding, get them back to them. And part of the issue with police departments is sometimes their evidence rooms are only open during certain hours. People work during the day. You have to call and make an appointment. It shouldn't be that hard for someone who's been found not guilty or innocent to be able to get their gun back. It's a constitutional right. I think we just need to keep that in mind. I wasn't particularly thrilled with the fact that someone has to have, that they automatically do a NICS check before the gun is given back. Why? Why do they need to do that? So, I think, to me, one of the most important things is that it says that they get their guns back within 10 days. I'm okay with that, 10 business days. And maybe by putting that into statute, people will get their guns back in a reasonable amount of time.
I just have, can
Yes,
you just
Senator.
clarify the line that the committee amendment changed? Just,
Yes, it's on page 1, on line 25, and it changes.
Yeah.
You see, safety may, it says shall provide a proceed response to the requesting court. So it just says from may to shall, that they have to provide that. Okay, so we have amendment number, oh, where'd it go now?
0605.
Okay. Has an ought to pass motion. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Oh, okay. See, we've done so many. It's like we lose track of time. Okay, so there's a motion of ought to pass as amended on House Bill 1339. Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
no,
Okay. Senator Abbott, would you like to do this one?
Yes.
Okay, there we go. Okay. Next, we have House Bill 1350. I'd also like to move interim study on this one for the same reasons we interim studied the other one. This one is possession limits from 2 to 4 ounces. Again, let's see what the federal government has to say. We might want to change that once it's declassified. So Senator Chandler?
yeah, on this one, the other one, I could support the interim study. I think there were a lot of layers to that. On this one, I really do think ought to pass makes sense. I don't think it would be a lot of patients looking to buy the maximum amount, but the maximum amount is not unreasonable for someone who has to travel. Increasing the maximum amount is not unreasonable for someone who has to travel a long distance to acquire their therapeutic cannabis. So I really would support an OTP on this, prefer an OTP on this. Thank you.
Okay, are there any further comments? Senator Rosenwald?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also would prefer to see an ought to pass motion. I've been in a number of hearings about the therapeutic cannabis program and heard a lot from patients who are qualified patients. First of all, the stuff is expensive. And many of many of the qualified patients are on disability and can hardly afford the 2 ounces now. So I don't think there will be a lot of patients trying to acquire 4 ounces. But I've also heard that travel is difficult. Many of them don't drive. They have to find someone to take them to the ATC. There are only 14 sites in the state. So I think to the extent that we can make their lives a little bit easier, that would be helpful.
Senator Abbas?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, too much too quickly when it comes to cannabis, and that it's going to include therapeutic. Understand that what is strong, it could be the higher potency stuff, but, and often when you have a retail market, the retail and the therapeutic product is one and the same. So you don't want to have different possession limits floating around. I understand that, but I think it's a different section, but these are going to be conflicting. So I think we got to slow it down, see what happens with the other one before we even start. And if any person gets in trouble for one, they can say, well, I get this for personal use because the other one had a 4 ounce limit. I get that people are going to say, oh, therapeutic should have the same, but we're going to keep mixing and matching sections, and I think we just take it slow because the packaging will look exactly the same on many of the products. There will be no distinction.
I'm gonna just chime in here. We've heard the issue of people having to travel long distances. And over the years, we have added more of these places for people to get medicinal marijuana, to make it easier for people to access. I mean, ideally, you'd like to have a place on the corner store or something. That's not going to happen. But I think we have made it a lot easier for patients. There's no reason to raise it from 2 to 4 ounces. And in fact, the representative who brought the bill forward explained the bill aims to align the purchase limits for therapeutic cannabis with the proposed limits for recreational cannabis and House Bill 1633. Well, we've laid an amendment on top of 1633. This 1633, as we got it from the House, doesn't exist anymore. So I just think that's why I moved at interim study. All of these things need to be considered together at the same time. But if we're going to pass recreational marijuana, why do we need medicinal? So we have an interim study motion. Is there any further discussion on the interim study motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, and I will do this one. Okay, next we have 1432, relative to prohibiting certain use of deep fakes and creating a private claim of action. I'd like to move ought to pass. Is there a second? Second, okay. We have amendment number 1800S. It was recommended to us by the industries. Mr. Burnett, do you have a copy of the amendment? And this is your suggested language to make this work. Would you like to come forward just to talk a little bit about the amendment? The tech industry. Okay.
For the record, Jamie Burnett, representing Google.
Okay.
So, do you have a specific question, or do you want me to speak to the amendment? So,
talk about the.
I would say, so the amendment that has been drafted addresses our concern perfectly. The concern with the original bill is drafted, and by the way, I would say that the language that's in the original bill was very similar to another bill that was an election law. They had actually just amended that yesterday, like you're doing today. So this would keep it consistent. The concern was that the language, although intended to exempt a technology platform that might offer an AI tool would actually still implicate them and create liability for them. So this would take care of that issue. The one thing that I would point out to the committee, I think with the bill, with the underlying bill, I think it depends on what your intent is. The fact that you just passed HB 1319, which would create, which under the statute would allow for criminal penalties for synthetic sexual images. That bill that you pass also includes digitally enhanced and created and distributed and produced images as well, or i.e. deepfakes. So that would take care of that. The one that passed out of election law would take care of deepfakes used in terms of distorting or attacking or misleading for election officials. So this one here, I'm not sure is necessary unless there's maybe something in between those that we're getting at. But that's really at the discretion of the committee. I think it might be redundant with the other bills, but that's your discretion. As far as the amendment's concerned, it takes care of our issue, and I think it would make it a good bill. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Burnett? Okay,
thank you very much.
So we have an ought to pass on amendment number 1800S. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. We have underlying a motion of ought to pass on House Bill 1432. Is there any further discussion? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, is there a motion for the consent calendar? Moved by Senator Gannon, seconded by Senator Chandler. Is there any discussion on the consent calendar motion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, who would like to take this one out?
Sure.
Okay, Senator Gannon. Okay, next we have House Bill 1511. I would like to move ought to pass, seconded by Senator Chandler. This bill is a housekeeping measure for the Department of Health and Human Services. On that spot. Senator, Mr. Williams in the back is saying yes. So is there any discussion on the ought to pass motion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, is there a consent calendar motion? Moved by Senator Chandler, seconded by Senator Gannon. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, Senator Chandler, would you like to take this one? Okay, next we have House Bill 1539, annulling, resentencing, or discontinuing prosecution of certain cannabis offenses. I'm going to move interim study
Second.
again.
Second.
Okay, and I just don't want to be redundant.
Also addressed in 1633.
Okay. So the motion is interim study. Is there any further discussion? Okay, so all, the motion is interim study. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Senator Abbott, you want to take this one?
Sure.
Okay. Next, we have House Bill 1564. I would like to move ought to pass. Seconded by Senator Chandler. I really have to applaud Representative Katab. She put a lot of work into this. She reached out to all the parties that are dealing with this. This is a very different attempt, I should say, rather than folks coming in and saying, this is what it needs to be. She actually took the time to talk to the advocates, the court, everyone who's involved to come up with something that I think is a step in the right direction. So is there any further discussion? I feel like I'm talking here too much on ought to pass. Okay. Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Is there a motion for the consent calendar? Moved by Senator Chandler, seconded by Senator Gannon. Okay, any further discussion on the consent calendar motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, I'll take this one too. Okay, next we have, House Bill 1573. This, we do have an amendment, and I'll move the bill ought to pass for the, discussion of the amendment, which is amendment number 1609S. So is there any discussion on the amendment? Senator Chandler?
Am I correct that this is essentially the language that we have passed already?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, we had this bill, I think most of it is in Senate Bill 417. So, okay, so we have amendment number 1609S. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so we have the bill ought to pass as amended. Is there any discussion on ought to pass as amended? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Okay, we have a consent calendar motion. Is there any discussion? Senator Gannon?
No, I just,
Oh, seconds. Okay. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Senator Chandler? Okay. I would have looked at Senator Whitley and said, Senator Whitley, you want to take this on? But she's not here. We can't make her take something out. What's the matter? I did?
You don't move your car, you're gonna be stuck.
Uh-oh. Well, my keys are on the desk. Just move my car. Yeah, I always leave my keys out. Have somebody move my car. Yeah.
Can I move
No,
mine?
6. It starts at 6. Yeah. Yes.
Can I just move mine? I'm right there.
You're, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 left.
we get to 5.
Yeah, mine's different. My keys are right there. Just move it someplace and let me know. Yeah, they're on my desk.
Mine's Irish.
Just be careful when you,
I don't know.
Deb, just be careful. The music's probably loud. Because I like to listen to.
I'm right across the street and left.
No, it's get to a leap.
No. Okay, are you gonna go? Okay, all right. Do you want us to wait until you get back? Because I don't want anybody else to get stuck. All right, well, we're just gonna keep on. Harold,
She told me I'm in a bad spot.
I know, but the problem is, we're gonna need you to vote here. I'm sorry. Why don't you have Ryan move your car, your truck?
Give me 2 minutes.
Okay, if he's, all right. The committee will be in recess for 2 minutes. Oh, my goodness. Okay. The committee will come out of recess. The next bill we have is House Bill 1588, relative to court jurisdictions over persons receiving special education. I'd like to move on to pass. Second by Senator Gannon. This, I think, addresses statutes concerning court jurisdiction of children in need of services concerning special education up to 22 years. That's about it. Is there any further discussion? Yes.
I just noticed a giant fisting note.
Well, you're going to be busy in finance.
We're doing it for the children.
Okay, so we have an ought to pass motion. Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, is there a consent calendar motion?
So moved.
Moved by Senator Gannon, seconded by Senator Abbas. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Senator Rosenwald, would you like to take this one out?
Yeah.
Yes,
Pardon?
I'll take right in finance.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I gotta give you one. Just one. Okay, next we have House Bill 1589, establishing a Veterans Treatment Court. I have an amendment. It is amendment number 1814S. And this is language that came from the judicial branch. Ms. Keegan is here, or Cregan. If you'd like to come up and just talk a little bit. We got 15 minutes before we have to leave. So hopefully, yeah, no pressure.
I will
Well, they
not
do.
speak for 15 minutes. Hello, everyone. Erin Cregan, General Counsel, Judicial Branch, talking while sitting. Thank you very much for bringing this amendment forward. At the very end there, as the House was extremely jammed up to hit their deadline, they were getting this out of finance at the last moment, moving an amendment through, and they assigned a number of administrative duties to the Chief Justice himself personally, which he simply will not be able to do. They will probably be done by our statewide treatment court coordinator, who is an expert and who can spend the time to do these things diligently. And there was also some garble that they left accidentally, some previous remnant language on how they had planned to structure the finances. So it was just one sentence that they accidentally left over. And I was told, go to the Senate, they will fix that for you. And here we are.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions about Amendment 1814S? Okay, seeing none. All in favor say aye. Thank you, Ms. Cregan. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. The bill is ought to pass as amended. Is there any further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so Senator Chanley moves consent. Is there any discussion on the consent calendar motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Is there, who would like to take this one out? Okay, Senator Gannon. Okay, next we have House Bill 1591. I'd like to move on to pass. Seconded by Senator Chanley. Okay, is there any further discussion on the bill? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, is there a consent calendar motion? Moved by Senator Rosenwald, seconded by Senator Chanley. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, Senator Chanley, would you like to take this one out? Okay. Next, we have House Bill 1711. I'd like to move ITL, seconded by Senator Gannon. Okay, is there any discussion on the ITL motion? Oh, yes, go ahead, please.
I oppose the ITL motion. This is one of the first bills that has come to us that has received support in one chamber or the other. That is a compromise, a bipartisan, a compromise bill, bipartisan bill, and something that would respond to preventing gun violence. It will not eliminate gun violence, but it is one small but good step to achieving gun violence prevention. And I do support the bill.
Senator Gannon?
This is allowing for confiscation of firearms from individuals based on psychological and bureaucratic assessments. It's bypassing due process, and that should accompany any infringement on our constitutional Second Amendment rights. The most troubling aspect of the bill is it doesn't require a criminal act to strip a citizen of their rights. Just merely the judgment or of unfitness of officials is enough to seize legally owned firearms. And for those reasons, I will be voting ITL.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say, of the ITL motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, Senator Gannon, do you want to do it? Or
Sure.
Senator Abbas, you want to do it? Okay, Senator Abbas will take this one out. Okay, last one we have is House Bill 1713. I'd like to move interim study on this bill.
Sorry.
This is seconded by Senator Gannon. We know that this bill was passed for a method to force Adam Montgomery to face his accusers in court. A judge has since ordered him to do so. We had a lot of testimony from our corrections branch and from our counties about how difficult it would be to force somebody out of a cell. They're putting their corrections officers in danger. And there's also issues of the other inmates that are present, that they could, it's just not a good situation for everyone involved. So I just think interim study would be an appropriate measure. Senator Abbas?
I really wanted to pass this one.
I don't want to put our counties and our corrections officers in a difficult place forcing somebody. I think they're going to have a hard enough time with the court telling them that he has to be there, but the purpose of this was for one person. So,
Madam, I don't mean to speak out of turn, but if someone commits a violent crime or, even, vehicular homicide, even, those impact statements, I think and I sat through a hearing. It wasn't even a case I was on. I was just waiting for my case to be called in. About 2 hours of impact statements I heard. And I really think it was a vehicular homicide case. It wasn't the same as what you were referencing, but I think it was important that the person who was being sentenced was in the room to hear from the person's whose father's dead because of drunk driving. If they want that person there to be there in person to listen to the impact statements, I understand that there can be some dangerous criminals, and many of them are. I know if I was ever in that position, I would prefer to tell that person how I feel right to the face. It's just me.
But again, this is for one person. He refused. He said he wasn't going to court, and the judge now has ordered him to be there. So he's gonna have to go. He has no choice. So it's dangerous. That's the testimony we heard, to force someone. Not only for the corrections officers, but for the prisoner as well. So I just don't think we need to do this. Senator Chandler?
Thank you. I was very persuaded. I wasn't sure where I stood on this bill, and I was really persuaded by the testimony. I do understand the questions you've raised as they were raised at the public hearing, but I do think it is an interesting consideration in our system of justice, should the defendant need to be present for certain parts of the procedure.
And I think that, again, this is one of those kind of tricky ones, I guess, is probably, I think most people go to court on the day of sentencing, but again, this was for one particular person. And so we heard from a variety of folks talking about how this can be, how it can very quickly escalate. So he's going to court. He's going to have to go. They're going to compel him to go. So, okay. So we have a motion of interim study. Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. All in favor of the interim study motion? Aye? Okay.
Oh, just me?
No, me too. I guess
I'm going the other way.
he's going the other way. Okay, so the interim study fails. All right, so since it failed, I've got an amendment because we can't pass it as it is. This amendment came from, let's see, you should all have it from the Merrimack County Sheriff in consultation with others. It is amendment number 1573S. I'm sorry? I don't think you do. So,
Is it this language here?
no, it's pretty extensive because, again, you are forcing someone to go, and that's the issue. I think probably, I was gonna say we can bring in this as a floor amendment, maybe? You have the amendment, Senator Abbas? I don't think so, because I think I'm the only one who had it.
I don't know. As you can tell, I got very excited and didn't even know there was an amendment, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, okay, move on to pass.
Second.
This is second, okay. Is there any further discussion on the ought to pass? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? No, so it's 3-2. Okay, Senator Abbas, you can take this one out and I will hand you the amendment. You can turn it into a floor amendment. You can speak to the counties and the correction officers and figure that out. Okay, I think that is the last bill that we have. I appreciate all your work this afternoon. Can I get a motion to come out of executive
So
session? Moved by Senator Gannon, seconded by Senator Chandler. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, no, we're done for the day. Everybody's.
Cindy, thanks for coming to visit. Thank you for coming to play. We will skedaddle.